But, and of course, our colleagues at this university, particularly Raffaele Marchetti and Silvio Melegazzi, which did a great job in producing the book that you have in front of you. So the focus of my presentation will be on an aspect which has become more important in the last years, which is security and defense. As we know, for many, many years, the relationship between Italy and Korea, and what I'll say now about Italy can also be applied to other European nations. And so in the case in this case, Italy and Korea, for many years, the relationship was mainly one of economic and commercial issues. There was also like the element of cultural exchanges. But when it came to security and defense, we didn't have that much, especially during the Cold War. Now, things started to change, and changed when Donald Trump came to power. So that's why we can expect with the second Trump administration, these areas of cooperation to receive another boost. What happened is, we remember Trump in the first administration, very likely to be followed by the second one, was kind of like not very keen on the system of alliances, to say the least, and created some kind of uneasiness towards the allies both in Europe and Asia, which led American allies both in Europe and Asia to collaborate more between themselves. That was one of the drivers between the emergence and the fast rise of security and defense cooperation between Italy and Korea. And again, the same can be applied in the case of France, the UK, Germany, Spain, etc. Now, what are the main drivers of this security and defense cooperation? Well, the first one, as mentioned, is the international dimension. The international dimension that led the two sides to decide to cooperate more between themselves and outside the involvement, or at least the involvement of the United States, so in an autonomous, independent way. The second is also what was happening at the regional level, in particular in Europe, in the framework of the European Union and NATO. Beginning with the European Union, which started to have an important political security and defense element, you had European countries, including Italy, to boost the relations with the Republic of Korea, also in security and defense issues. And of course, in the last years, NATO, with South Korea joining NATO. And also, in this context, we can also see some differences which emerged. You have a lot of details in my chapter, which I'm trying to tell you now. It's like the few elements which I find more interesting. What happened between Italy and Korea, which again can be said the same as we take France, Germany, Spain, and Korea, is that the relationship in security and defense was much more driven, much more from an autonomous point of view than in the case of Europe and Japan. Why? Because in the case of European countries and Japan, it was much more focused on the interoperability of their armed systems with NATO. Much less in the case of Korea. And Korea was really an example whereby Europeans, in this case Italy, started to cooperate with another ally, the United States, yet doing it from an independent point of view, which means that the interoperability of the defense systems developed together is not necessarily dependent or applicable immediately to NATO armaments. And this is a very big difference. So in the case of Japan, we have still the focus on having the United States somehow involved. In the case of Italy and Korea, again, Europeans and Korea, we have this much less. So those were like the drivers which led to a unique kind of like a cooperation. What are the main, let's say, moments of this cooperation? Well, we can say in 2018, when former President Moon came to Italy, we had the signing of a strategic partnership. At that moment, there was the beginning of the security and defense pillar in the bilateral relationship. But also the decision by current President Yoon, when he came to power, to focus relations with NATO. That gave additional elements for cooperation between Italy and Iraq in the NATO framework. And finally, let me remind the visit by Italian President Sergio Mattarella to Korea in November 2023, when they signed important cooperation agreements, in particular on space and high-tech. So in the bulk of the chapter that you find in this fantastic book, which was produced by this team, you have a lot of examples about cooperation, in particular when it comes to space technology, which is quite unique. And again, it is space technology which is not necessarily compatible with American armed systems. This is kind of a novelty which has never happened in the case of Japan, for instance. And you also have like arms. So many people don't know that like this joint development of weapon systems between Italian and Korean companies. Again, I don't want to bore you with many examples. I just tell you a few cases. The first one in the space technology is what Thales Alenia Space, which is a joint venture between French Thales and Italian Leonardo, are doing with the Korean aerospace industries. The other one, always done with the Korean aerospace industries, is what is done by the European arms manufacturer, which is called the MBDA. As you probably know, in the last 2 decades, European arms manufacturers have merged many assets, so we now have European arms manufacturers. It is these arms manufacturers at the European level, within which Italy plays an important role, that are collaborating with Korea to develop joint arms systems. Again, you find many more details about in the chapter. I probably only had 1 minute to conclude, so I have more. 3 minutes. So this is an aspect which is the industrial aspect of the collaboration. We also have the more political aspect, which has taken the form, for instance, in the cooperation between Italy and Korea, again in framework of the EU, in the naval operation of the coast of Somalia, in the operation EU-NAVFOR. And also we had, in the framework of NATO, cooperation between Italy and Korea in Afghanistan. And also, something that Michael Reiter knows very well, in the context of NATO, about the cyber defense, in the context of the Cyber Defense Center of Excellence. So we have therefore the industrial side, which is, again, we cannot call it completely national, also in the case of Europe, because of the way the industry has been developed in Europe in the last years. But we also have the political level, the decision to collaborate both bilaterally, but more and more in the framework of the EU and NATO. And also, what are the areas? So the areas that you found also in one of the slides are essentially nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament, space policy and technology, very important, defense industry, and also maritime security and naval diplomacy. So this leads me to conclude that Italy and Korea, which it took me some time to develop and to find all the information, have formed this kind of cooperation which is quite unique. As I said at the beginning, something that not many people are aware of. It involves some patterns which are quite different from what we had in the past. And the most important one is that it is pretty independent from the United States. And it is something that it is not easy to find in other cases where Italy, let's say, collaborates with Japan or other like-minded countries. So let me terminate here by saying that this should provide a foundation for something quite unique, which could also serve as an example for other countries, that especially now that we have a Trump 2.0 administration, would actually look around to see if there are examples on how like-minded partners, still remaining in the context of the US system of alliances, could be very likely incentivized to collaborate more among themselves. In the case of Italy and Korea collaboration on security and defense can provide such an example of how good allies, solid allies of the United States can collaborate even outside the control the framework of the United States, still remaining inside the alliance. Thank you.